it's like, what can we then use to give that person that those tools to help them more in health for life kind of thing. So it was, so that's one of the things I think, having gone through this field with all these different spheres, it was like not being limited to one particular way of movement. So it wasn't being limited by the yoga. It's like, I mean, we've had a lot of discussions about this. I mean, I think weight training and yoga are perfect companions.
So I'm here with a really old friend of mine, Steve Bracken. And Steve, like our colleague Rupert, has been, since lockdown, has been stuck in India. However, I was in India in January, teaching on the Yoga Health Mandala teacher training, and I've been coming out there quite a few years each sort of January time to teach for the guys. And I love teaching out there for them, and it's always an honor and a privilege to be able to teach for them on that particular course. But alongside that, Steve and I go back, I think it's over 20 years, something like that. We've been around a lot, actually in the 90s, it might have been, late 90s. And, you know, we've had a long association in the world of movement, Steve and I, and we've both got the same sort of love and passion and drive for anything that might be anatomically based, but how that kind of relates to motion and kind of coming up with new ideas and making up our own ways to move sometimes to sort of understand stuff. And I've always loved working with Steve and exploring things with him. And also Steve comes from, you know, a really rich martial arts background as well. So, you know, I've been sort of privileged to work alongside Steve and study with him in certain practices as well. And it's always caught me off guard. It's always caught me by surprise, and just where you come from with it as well, and the dynamics of the way that you work with the movement. And there's something that I still recollect, and I was talking to Chris Lechner about this the other day, is that we used to do those sessions at Natural Bodies in Bond Street, which were the movement type stuff. Remember, we kind of set up that little idea called the movement, where there was you, me, I think Charlie Morrissey, Alan Allard, and a few others, and Jason. And we would just put ideas of movement together. And you used to really run those sessions in a way. You know, somehow you just brought it to a close beautifully and look at what we did meant to us. You know, what did it show up in our life, and how would we then take that into the next 6 months until we all got together again? And that was such a profound time that it still rings in my mind, even when I'm out there teaching and working with people, kind of using elements of that idea. And I would love to kind of have that stuff going together again at some point if we could.
That would be,
anyway, Steve Bracken,
India.
welcome.
Yeah, hi.
So, go on. You're going to say something just then.
I'll ask away.
Okay, well, no, I mean, it's really, Steve, how did you get to, well, what got you interested in the whole kind of practice world, the martial arts world, the movement world? You know, what was the thing that really sparked you off and got you excited about it from a young age?
Okay, so probably started 12, 13 years old, martial arts. I think probably the first influence, like many people, would have been Bruce Lee at that time. It's like good old Bruce. So yeah, so it got me into that whole martial arts world, and I probably ran with that for maybe 15, 18 years. And at the time, it's when you had like limitless amounts of energy. So, you know, it was training like 7-hour training sessions, you know, like 6 times a week, you know, really kind of ridiculous at some stages. And obviously I was at school, so then it'd be after school, etc., etc. And I suppose that's first introduced movement, and of course it was originally the Jeet Kune Do stuff of Bruce Lee. Then it went to Chinese Kung Fu, and that had, you know, lots of these sort of animal movements. So that was a whole different way of moving. And from there it's learned like how you could change your movement pattern could create, if you couldn't get through someone's guard in the martial arts, if you had that knowledge to change your own movement pattern, you could then come in a different way. So it was learning to be intelligent with your movements to sort of achieve your goal. And then went through sort of Wing Chun, and that went through into when the MMA started coming out. And that was the time I kind of finished with that, because I kind of got as far as I could, or as far as I wanted to go. And then what came after that? Then the personal training, and went into that world. And then the yoga world, which started with myself. And then into the more like the physio world, sports therapy, etc., etc. And then that took me much more, from my own interest, into rehab, because it was like, how can I show people how to help themselves with these specific injuries, as opposed to try and do it so much for them. It's like, I can help you, but then I can give you information you need so you can go and do this yourself. So that was a kind of, the journey up to now.
That's a long journey as well, huh?
It's been a long time, yeah. Many
years. I just want to go back to that animal form stuff, because there was something that I really got, it was quite a profound understanding with me on some of the animal forms that we had practiced together in Bond Street. And there was something that you said to me, because you noticed in something I think I was doing that I was just mimicking a shape. But you then brought in the idea of, well, what about embodying the behavior of the animal? And that just stopped me in my tracks. I thought, holy cow, okay, this switch in behavior isn't just a change of patterning. It was a change of mannerism, everything. It was the embodiment of that creature. How would it behave in that movement? And
that brings in a different type, to explore different types of movement patterns. And then they really do change when you can do that.
Yeah, it's like your whole demeanor changes, and I noticed that with you, because you adapt it so quickly. All of a sudden, when I think I kind of figure out who you are and where you are in that moment, you're not there anymore, and it's something else. It's
and you play the dance, and it's kind of like you feed off each other, see what they're doing, that change, and you get this lovely interplay of movement.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's kind of a state of mind that occurs. And I feel this, I don't know, from your experience with that state of mind change, do you feel that of course there's a physicality that changes, but it feels like the tissue changes?
Well, on that, if you're sensing kind of, let's call it this energetic level, let's just call it that. It's like you can sense that in someone. So I remember once I was doing, I was being a bouncer, and I used to play around these ideas of like, essentially, feel like you're a brick wall, that kind of thing. And when I used to do that, I used to get things like, "Oh, you feel really solid, mate," was kind of the reply. And so I think it's not, the tissue, the whole thing changes. And it's like, and people sense it and pick up on it. And, whatever interpretation you want to say, where that's coming from, I think it's, it's for the tissues, it's a fluid, it's, could be other stuff as well. But we can then use that to our advantage, because you can, in martial arts sense, you can read where their weaknesses are as well. So let me try and make that a bit more defined. Like, if you imagine, it's like, if you sense in, so when you fight, you're not just concentrating on that physical, you're opening up your senses. You can feel where there's like gaps in people, where their weaknesses are. And those gaps is where you can always hit and always strike.
Yeah.
So that opening up the sense, so you open up the tissues, but you're opening up the whole thing, can really help our movement.
Yeah.
I know that makes any sense.
No,
it's very specific to martial arts, but I think we can take it into other realms as well.
But I think that's what you do so well as well, because I mean, you're saying, does that make sense? And of course it makes sense, because in times that I've worked with you, you've always seen where there's been a hole in my movement or
Yeah.
the energetics of my movement, whatever it is we want to use. And you would talk about it that way. And I would constantly think, what the hell is it that he's seeing? Why can't I see this in myself? How can he see this? How can he see this? And it kind of takes me to someone like Tom Myers. Tom Myers has got quite a brilliant eye for body reading. You know,
Yeah.
you can see stuff that people can't see very easily. He gets to it quite quick, and he has a particular talent in that.
Yeah.
And you definitely have that talent in being able to see that in the face of two people kind of sparring with each other. All that's going on. You're dealing with that, but also you can see these other things happening. And, yeah, that's quite profound. And I kind of now, from my own movement understanding and seeing movement, which I've always been able to do, and to me, I've always heard I can hear movement, if that makes sense. It's a strange thing.
I mean, everyone's going to have their strong area.
Yeah, and I kind of get it now in that situation in terms of the kind of the martial side of it, because it can be quite emotional. There's a lot going on, and of course you're a big guy. You know, you're much taller than me, and you know, working with you is actually can be really daunting in that respect. But so there's all that going on, and then I'm trying to see where the spots are. So, oh, hang on a second, I just got to keep protecting myself.
Yeah, it's quite a thing to be able to keep that calmness in you know, in those situations where you're being pressured.
Yeah, and I see that with you, because you kind of drop into another place inside yourself. It's an interesting dynamic, and that's something I feel with you, is that oh, Steve's gone there, now this is dangerous, you know, and it's, you don't look dangerous in that moment, but the feeling comes across as like, okay, he's now in that place. That's very interesting place to be. But I also see you do that when we've trained together. I've seen you do that in your practice when it comes to yoga as well. So like you said, it doesn't only just carry into movement practice. I think these things can be carried into every aspect of life.
Well, it's all movement, and you know, in the yoga, it's, you know, it's, you're sending awareness or whatever, you know, into different areas of the body to open it up. So yeah, it's just becoming, it's like you should become more subtle with your practice, if you like. I mean, that on yoga.
So in terms of then, because we've done various other things where you've kind of had backgrounds with your shamanic type stuff, and then the sweat lodges as well, haven't you?
Yes, many years of doing that world.
How did that come about for you? What got you interested there?
Oh, that's quite a long story. Okay, so I met a guy in, I just cut to one, because you know, these things happen over time. But I mean, I met one guy in India. He was asked to come there to clear out this valley of, yeah, spirits, whatever you want to call it, and then he's also all very strange. But anyway, he started speaking to his hand in Spanish, and then I could heard someone speaking in my head in Spanish, and I said to him, and he turned around and said, "Oh, you're picking up on it then?" And it was like, oh, okay, that's a bit weird, it's very strange, but I got interested, and so from there, and it rolled on from there. It's quite, I mean, that's a whole, I mean, it's a very different direction in conversation, but you know, it sort of went into that world and then sort of left it behind a bit, really, because, you know, again, it's very interesting, but I suppose my real quest was very much like, you know, a spiritual quest was really what makes you happy, where happiness lie. And all that stuff is wonderful, and it's kind of maybe a bit of a progressive path, and maybe sometimes it opens you up, but in the end you need to, I feel, let it go. And it's like, yeah, it's there, and it's, if it comes up, yeah, it's great, it's fun, but it's not to give it too much importance, because the real thing is kind of like what makes us happy, which is, yeah, the whole yogic thing, really. And we get a bit too caught up in all the bells and whistles and lights and the fancy stuff, and the kundalini rising, and you know, Because I mean, that was another thing. I come home, I used to be a plumber, came home, I just laid in my bed one day, and then there was this energy that just, based on my sacrum, and it just came up and it just started smacking into the back of my skull like a pile driver. I felt the skull kind of split open. I split, like it felt like it was pulling apart, and then there's all these visions, and I couldn't move, and it was like all very dramatic, And so I had to have a cup of tea and a chocolate biscuit after that one, and yeah, just ground that in. But it's like I didn't do anything for that; it just happened, and then back to work. So it was like, yeah, all this stuff is there, and it's interesting, and it's all maybe part of the journey, but it's not the main thing.
Mm. No, so I do find that these sort of processes are quite intimate.
Yeah.
It's not really for the rest of the world to have, if you see what I mean. It's a big element of. I'm doing this at the moment. I teach quite a bit of Qigong at the moment through the breath work, but only elements of that, because the Qigong has always been a real deep, personal, intimate practice of mine. That I would never share with the world. And I just thought, well, actually, at this particular moment, there's certain elements of Qigong that can be really helpful to some people. So from that sort of point of understanding the energetics within it, is sort of drip feeding some of that information out, and that's it. The rest of it is my own personal, deep practice, that it becomes almost like the bedrock behind everything else that we do, without necessarily needing to tell too many people about that, really, because it only makes sense to ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice way of looking at it, actually. It's yeah, I mean, I met some great osteopaths and physios, and some of them really did tap into that energetic world, but they never talk about it. It was never put a label on. They just kept it as a physio, and just kept it nice and simple. And because it's like I found, like in the healing world, the bedrock is the physical anatomy. I mean, that's you have to know that, and that's the bit you're mainly dealing with. And you can use other stuff to maybe help and inform, but the main thing is you just got to use whatever works to get them, better if you can, if not refer it on. And in the end, it's like often if you don't use that basic physical anatomy as a foundation, if you just concentrate too much on the whole energetic side, for example, then it's good, but it's like if a muscle's weak, it needs strengthening. So it's like you get your basics there, and that's your foundation. Anything else, helps that process.
Yeah.
But start at the foundation.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, because it's the whole thing that, say, the kind of some of the considerations with Vanda Scaravelli's work is that you create the conditions for something to occur.
Yeah.
So you and I both, you and I have had so many conversations around all sorts of stuff over these subjects over the many years, and once we can kind of get our system to a particular point, it knows what to do to take care of itself anyway. And it's too easy it's almost like overwatering the plant, just overboiling the egg, with those sort of analogies, is that we just go a bit too far with it, and then we see all sorts of chaos occur, where this system is actually so intelligent in itself. It knows what to do with all of those conditions and those environments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if we can teach our students just to find the basics there, and then they can learn to respond and follow what's required, I think that's quite important. And I know, you do that so well, because I've had many treatments from you as well in the past, and there is a quality where it almost feels like there's a sculpture at work. You're doing your work, and then you let it settle a bit, and you do your work and you let it settle a bit. So you're almost allowing the person under your hands to grow.
Nice way of saying it.
I mean, go on,
I'd say I was going to say, jump forward in time to like the yoga world. It's like when I was like teaching on the the anatomy. I think, I mean, what got me into the yoga of your class was learning all about the body, which was, you know, you did, you know, superbly well, and it was always a joy to listen and learn from you in that sense.
Thank you.
But it was like seeing people who did a particular type of yoga all had a lot of the same issues going on. So they had, you know, it might be SI, but that might not be because of yoga. It might be because it's mainly a female practice. You've got the whole hormone thing, pregnancies involved, and it could be exacerbated by, you know, doing maybe glutes are inhibited, which is another thing you see a lot. So there were certain patterns that people came and had. So it was like with the movement, it was not being limited by this is the movement. It was like just trying to use whatever movement people need to do to get back to health. So from martial arts, it's like, you know, we use all these different movements to get the goal. It's like even in say Scaravelli, it was like, why be limited to a certain way of moving, even though that's what it does, that's when it's boxed. But if someone has a dysfunction somewhere or hasn't got an optimal movement pattern, it's like, what can we then use to give that person that those tools to help them more, you know, health for life kind of thing. So it was, so that's one of the things I think, having gone through this field with all these different spheres, it was like not being limited to one particular way of movement. So it wasn't being limited by the yoga. It's like, I mean, we've had a lot of discussions about this. I mean, I think weight training and yoga are like perfect companions. They just go together so well, but of course, you don't mix them, but they complement each other. Well, it may depend on the type of yoga you do, but say a Scaravelli, then it would be great because we need muscle tone, muscle function. It's like not one thing gives you everything. So it's nice to have that kind of broad range and just explore movement and be interested in movement in all these different spheres. You know, so yeah, so I think having that wide branch of movement, be able to move in different ways and being open to different ways of movement is very beneficial for you and health. You know?
Yeah. So is this how you came about with the health mandala, your idea around your kind of business idea?
Say that again?
So is this how you got to get to the idea of your yoga health mandala, or the health mandala that you created?
Oh, yeah, it was just to not be, you know, yeah, it was to bring in the aspects of health and then make it variable so it can be adapted to a person. I mean, that's kind of the, you know, the theory. Obviously, the practice is more sort of detailed, but it was, yeah, not being limited by a particular structure.
Yeah.
You know, it's to honour what certain movement patterns can do and why they're so good. But then, you know, if we need to address an issue or something, we can use whatever's appropriate for that and bring it into our practice, and not be, not think, oh no, we can't use that. That's not, you know, that's not yoga or something. Which, you know, I think is a mindset that we can go through as we, you know, as a stage of practice. You know, we can get caught up in specific ideas like this is the way, and you know, get a bit older and you realise, well, actually, there's lots of different ways, and they're all pretty good.
That's, isn't it? I mean, because you know, we've both got similar backgrounds, and you know, our personal training backgrounds and stuff like that. You know, I'd always find when someone just said, well, you know, this is Gary, the personal trainer, I just thought, well, actually, yeah, but it's so much more than that. But I don't know how to describe it, because there weren't any other, well, there still aren't that many words to describe what it is that we would do by, you know, pulling from these different kind of regions or areas of health and movement and so on. Is that, yeah, it is that you're bringing a group of ingredients together for that one person. But then the other person that comes in, if they even showed the same issues, they wouldn't have the same mix of ingredients to work with, because their life, the way they live, their attitude would be the foundation for what generates those new ingredients that come in. You know, it's it's quite, I mean, that's the beauty of it, I think, and that's the joy of it, because you're living through somebody's lifetime, you know, each time you
Yeah,
see someone.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And trying to understand where, often with, not always, but often, well, we're dealing with some kind of, um, you know, pain, injury, and it's like seeing where all that might have started, where it all may have originated from, and then and then the best way of addressing that.
So you've, I did notice with you is that your skills really went to a different level with your hands-on skills when you've been working with this guy Jag in India.
Yeah. So okay. So Jad he trained with Krishna Chara,
Mm.
and he was a cousin of VKS Iyengar, and it was, and I worked with him in Mysore over several years, for a few months at a time, short periods, kept going back every year. And that was quite interesting because once we did some yoga with him and sort of saw how he would have taught, Krishna Chara taught, at that, because Jag had probably been, quite young, sort of 12-ish at that time, he was training with Krishna Chara. And to see how he would have taught, which is very different, very traditional, very different to how we would practice now, and the evolution that's happened in our lifetimes. And he was about 70 I saw him. He saw about 70 people a day, treat them. And he never charged any money, ever. So, he was really coming from that real Indian yogic tradition, if you like. And, incredibly powerful in who he was, his character. And he could do lots of healing stuff, but he just worked on a physical level, just doing manipulations because he didn't have that long with people, and he would just see them again and again and again every day until they got better. And he brought in that whole holistic way, so he'd bring in the food, the physical yoga, and he would berate people, like, but coming from a sense of love, he really wanted to help them. So he wouldn't, because people would cry in front of him because he would absolutely go to town. But he always used to come from a place of really wanting to help them. So, for example, just for a joke, they might come in and maybe a guy was overweight, but it was affecting his lower back. He would make fun of it. Like, why he's pregnant, etc., etc. But it was like tough love. I'll give you a nice example then, but he would, if you smoked in front of children, it was like World War III would break out. So and it was really interesting to see how he didn't take on people's stuff. He wasn't trying to be nice to people. He wasn't, because sometimes I used to give treatments and feel tired afterwards. It was like I was tired. It was like somehow I was, over-giving or something. But with him, it was very clear. It was just straight back on something that you have to fix yourself. Nothing to do with me. You do it. I just do this and this, and you sort yourself out. And here are some tools, a way of doing it. And that kind of created an energetic shift in me. And it wasn't before I was trying to come from a place of probably trying to be too nice in some ways, or trying to please, or do good, or etc. All these kind of areas that traps we can fall into, but it wasn't really helping the person. Exactly. So it was I probably grew up some at that stage of life, and when I sort of stopped that, then I think my work got better.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because I think there is a place where I think the way that we can treat people doesn't actually help them to get any further down the line. It just sort of keeps them in the same place, and there has to be a shift in state again, doesn't there? Really, it's yeah. I mean, it's difficult to put it into words. Actually, now you've got me there. but there's this whole process of, and I think it's changing a lot in the West here, because I think people are just trying to be a little bit too kind all the time, and it keeps the loop going. I remember Blackaby used to say something around this, is that as an osteopath, he's constantly putting himself out of business. Yeah, he doesn't want to see the person again.
I always said 3 times there's no significant improvement. See someone else.
Yeah, see someone
I'll try
else.
and help. See someone else. But,
so, I mean,
that's long enough.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds harsh. Doesn't want to see them again. It's actually helping them out so that they don't need to come back to him.
Yeah.
And the fact that we've also got movement, and the same with Pete, we can actually educate the individual in certain movement dynamics that they can work with to take care of themselves. Yeah, I mean, I know, and the same with you, is that if we feel like we might need a treatment, of course, I would work with you, or I'll go and work with Pete. There's not many people I would trust working with my body, and you're one of them I would trust, and the same with Pete. But that's a bit like having an MOT in the same ways we would need to do that with a car. It's important, I think, for us to do that and have somebody else's eyes and hands on us for a while. But yeah, the dependency on the therapist, I think, can be a bit of an issue.
Yeah, and exactly. Especially if I mean, it's an obvious thing, but if you're a therapist, there could be a conflict of interest with, if I see them, I obviously get paid, may or may not be. So that can be an interesting one. But yeah, when you go through that, obviously then that fear drops away, and you tend to get, well, I've always found there's never been a lack of people with injuries, unfortunately, or something, So
it's interesting, because I think as long as as long as there's environments for our body to move around, then there's always going to be some kind of issue that comes up, because the body deals with different forces and loads. And I think, injuries are going to occur one way or another, and at least we can help the individual understand what it is that they do with themselves that has this thing occur, and then they know how to take care of it, definitely.
Yeah, and that changes all the time. I mean, obviously, which from when I was young to now, I mean, like, that's sitting down all the time. That's probably got more profound. I mean, even in this whole lockdown thing, as I spoke to you earlier, I've been on a computer a lot working, in a different field from, the movement world, but it's like, it's interesting. It's like 8 hours, 10 hours. It's, there's stuff you have to do to try and counter that. And it's a problem a lot of people have.
So with the teacher training, the yoga teacher training that you are involved in with Rupert Johnson and Helen Noakes, the 3 of you kind of got together on an idea around that. And then I've seen you teach. I've kind of been in the sessions of you teaching, and you teach sort of the anatomy, but related to posture and movement, but also the biomechanics, and well, not only that, but how it's relating to life. So, what got you so interested in delivering that and doing that? Because I've seen you really kind of excel in that work as well, and it's been a real joy to watch you kind of put that across and how you deal with groups with that. How did that come about for you, Steve?
I think that just I touched on before earlier was just the thing about what's the thing that gets people. What does that person need to get them into health, as in not being bound by a certain movement form, if you like. So it was, I think that was the main thing. It's like, what is the thing that can give us optimal health for where we are in life and what's happened to us, and how to impart that. And of course, health is the big subject, and it includes a lot of areas: food, movement, attitude.
Yeah, and it's great, because I see that you bring that in really well, but also because you've got such a vast background and knowledge. You're experienced in the yoga practice. You understand the nature of the yoga that we're coming from, because you've been around that work such a long time, the work based around Vanda's work, but with other ideas of your own. And then, from your martial arts background and your other training, and
Mm.
then you kind of the energetics of life as well, is that that all comes together. So it's not out of place, because I've been on some trainings or taught on some trainings where I've watched somebody else come along and teach something where they come from a completely different background and don't understand the yoga, and have tried to apply what they're doing into the yoga, where you're bringing it out of everything and it all interweaves so beautifully.
Yeah, it comes from the body, as you know. It's like, and it's just the body, like the tissues, the fascia of the body, it comes from there.
Yeah.
It's unraveling or revealing,
Yeah.
as opposed to you trying to do it.
Yeah.
Inside out job.
So also, I mean, you were just, because we were talking before I kind of pressed record on this, is that, you're kind of like training a lot. And I've found this, I've been training a lot more during the lockdown time, and, much more exploratory with the body weight stuff, using weights. And you were saying that you're kind of working with your TRX and stuff and body weight.
Well, okay. I'll go over that briefly. So I had I put together a weight training program, and it's like solve problems. It's like solving problems. So in the body world, it's helping people, it's solving a problem basically. So in this training, I wanted to what's the optimal way of training I can put together in the gym environment that obviously creates health in the body, maximum gain but as least strain in joints, etc. So that was so I put this program together, and I put a body weight version of it so they could intermix. And so with lockdown happening, it's like, wow, so I haven't actually trained this week. I've gone back to the gym for 6 months. And 6 months, I got to try over this whole routine put together, which is a body weight training. And it's like, wow, I can train in the body and not lose any muscle, any strength over that period. And yeah, I'm training quite frequently, but not overly intensely, because 54. So it's we've got to be aware of that. And it's like, wow, what a great experiment! It's like it's amazing. It was like, yeah. And also in that whole program, I wanted to put little mobility sequences, which was very short that people could do, that were like one for the spine, 10 minutes, just short things that people could do to help their mobility with it as well. So we're trying to combine these different things. So we can use body weight, we can use cardio, we can use the gym, we can use movement practice, and we can just mobility practices and just slot them all together, to fit our lives and our needs. So that was the idea of this whole program, which I suppose comes from the idea again we seem to be talking about here is overall health. And of course, then on top of that, you can add in a deeper yoga practice, meditation practice, etc., etc. But the goal was health. So anyway, so over lockdown, that's what I've been doing quite a lot. Really interesting experiment, and quite surprising. I didn't think it would work so well. So that was a nice surprise.
And that's, I think, these are the things, is to put it to practice through our own body. The only way we're going to get any answers out of anything like that is just to go and do the experiment ourselves and notice the results. And it takes time. And I think that lockdown period of time is a good period of time to really notice those results, because it's not going to be just 1 month.
No, exactly. And, and the experiment's fun, but yeah, you have to give it time. To the little tweaks, the little thing, and the things that come out over time. So in a practice, we can't learn it in a week or a month. We just have to have over time, because then we just embody it. You get those little gems that sort of just drop in over time. When you're not thinking about it. So
that is interesting, isn't it? Because there is something that I was just thinking just then, as you were saying that, is that like you, me, Rupert, Chris Lechner, and various others, that we've been at this since we were kids, one way or another, and we really haven't wavered from the main essence of everything that we do. And what we know with that is that it takes time. So, when we have students that come and they want to get their quick fix, there's that kind of, you almost sort of feel like you're just nodding, looking at them, thinking there's going to be a lot of time involved here. In the long run, are you prepared to go the long run. It's the whole hog, you know, and just making sure you get up, show up and do the work every single day, because the body loves that kind of routine anyway. The mind really is nourished by that regular routine too. And then you start to see some changes come. And it's the beauty of it being, say, on this side of it, I don't know, what are we, masters, veterans? I'm not sure what we would call it anymore.
Old.
Oh, yeah. But we can kind of go into that experiment and also watch it as it's happening now. You know, because we can kind of veer off our sort of timeline, because the timeline is always the thing that keeps the constant, but we can veer off the timeline and come around and just watch it from afar, see the effects in the system, and then keep going again. Interesting.
Nice way of saying it.
So, because a lot of your stuff, you've recorded quite a lot of the stuff that you do, and you've put it, is it on YouTube?
I don't think I have recorded. Actually, I don't think I've recorded hardly anything, to be honest.
There's lots of snippets that I've seen, but most of them have been on Facebook.
I went through a stage of putting them on, little 1 minute things, just for fun. But I haven't done that for a long time. I should. I've got a lot. I like to record all this. Programs brilliant. I like to do all that. But it's I look at it and sometimes and go, oh my God, that's such a lot of work. So we'll see.
But in terms of where people would find you and just see reference to some of the stuff that you've done, where would they find you and find that? How would they find you?
At the moment, nowhere really.
Okay.
Not that interested. It's like,
Steve Bracken is someone that some people can find on Facebook.
No, I haven't looked at that for a very long time.
I know you haven't looked at it, but your detail is there, your material's there. And
that's still there. The
Health Mandala website, but that's still under construction.
Oh, Mandala Health, but I don't use it. No, I mean, I think I've dropped a lot of things.
Yeah, I understand.
It doesn't mean I won't, come back, because what's happened in the last few years, I've just done small workshops. I come back because I travel a lot, as you know, but not often in England. So I go there, I do a few workshops where I am, but just small kind of things, and that's kind of my interest, because it's not something I need to make my living from. So it really is like my just sort of following my joy, really, or my sort of interest. It's like, oh, this is interesting. Let's do a workshop in this, because this is quite an interesting subject. And I like doing that research, and it's like, and out of that research, things come out. So it's like, but in the last few years, it hasn't been, I haven't had that same push behind it, like when it was my main, income. So, and to be honest, it's been very nice.
Yeah.
So it's nice. I like doing those things, and I'm always researching, always learning. But yeah, I probably dropped out of the social media world for a while.
I mean, these things happen that way, and I'm sure, because from what I've seen with the way that you put that stuff out in the past, that's going to be happening again with Steve Bracken out there in the world, because I also know that you've got the same passion for it anyway. I know with your partner, so is it going to be a wife at some point?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a busy business you've got running at the moment, Jess's business. So I understand that, but it's for me, knowing you as a movement teacher and professional in that field as well, is that's something that is really valuable to the world. And people find you, they'll find you. This is the thing, and that's kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I will be putting some more out there, but I think it's like this whole thing of Corona. I think it's really important to be fluid. So it's like, as this lockdown came, I just shifted my work into much more online in this, this other business I have, and it's like, because that was a good way to earn money, and that was necessary at the time. It's like, okay, we should do that, and then, but there's natural lulls, then I'll just move back into the body work, and there's a lot of projects I have that I want to do. So yeah, I mean, I will put that all back out there at some point.
Okay. Well, listen, fantastic to speak. Thank you very much. and we'll be in touch soon again at some point. And maybe we'll get you. I did mention it. I think with Rupert, so I'll have you, Rupert, and Helen all together as a group, and
Oh yeah.
the yoga teacher training as well. So thank
Brilliant.
you.
Cheers, Gary.